Good morning, everyone. This is a Logic channel, and I'm here to tell you, black people, African Americans, should never, ever, ever celebrate the 4th of July. It's a little gloomy here in Atlanta today, so there's not much sun. But we only have a few days left before June 19th. And you need to know, as a people, that every time you celebrate the 4th of July, you are celebrating a time in history when our ancestors were enslaved. It was a terrible time in history. So why are we celebrating it? You see, in 1776, July 4th, these United States called themselves a born nation. The Declaration of Independence was signed. John Hancock was the president at that time, and John Hancock was a slaveholder. You see, July 4th, 1776, we were in bondage. July 4th, 1776, black people were being bought and sold as if we were cattle or horses. Now, our nation celebrates that day with great pride. So because we were brought here to these shores, black people felt, well, if I celebrate July 4th, that's going to make me a good citizen, a respected citizen. But it didn't happen that way, because now it's 2020 and we're still being killed in the streets. Now let me do a disclaimer. This is not hate speak. This is not vicious talk. This is going to be an old school history lesson, because somebody out there, some black person is getting ready to spend hundreds of dollars on meat, on pork, on clothes, to celebrate the 4th of July, a time in history when we were slaves. Now, let me bring you up to date to what happened. In 1862, the president, Abraham Lincoln, said slavery must end. He was getting a lot of heat. And he said, in order for me to have a clear presidency, we need to end slavery. Now don't forget, Abraham Lincoln was a mixed race gentleman. He was half black, passing for white. So in 1862, Abraham Lincoln wrote out a preliminary federal proclamation that said the Confederate States must let go of all slaves. But the Confederate States said, no way, we're not letting go of our slaves. We got free labor. All we have to do is get up in the morning, the slaves cook our food, the slaves clean up, the slaves take care of our land, the slaves nurse our children for our wives. The slaves do everything. Not only that, the slaves built all the infrastructure here in the United States. Every time you pass a railroad track, a slave built it. Here comes my neighbor on his motorcycle. That's okay. Every time you pass a railroad track, just know it was built by a slave. Every time you see a lighthouse, just know that that lighthouse was not only built by a slave, but the slaves manned the lighthouses. So the Confederate States said, no, we're not going to let the slaves go. That was in 1862. Now, who were those Confederate States? Well, Those Confederate states were South Carolina, Mississippi, Florida, Alabama, Georgia, Louisiana, and Texas. Now, particularly in Texas, there were areas in Texas, because it's so vast, and Georgia, all over the South, Mississippi too, that these slave owners who lived way out in what we call today the suburbs, they were still holding slaves. They still had people enslaved. So again, Abraham Lincoln, he came back in 1863 and he said, come on guys, you're messing up my presidency. You got to let go of these slaves. Again, the Confederate States said, no, we won't let go of the slaves. These slaves are the best thing that could have happened to us. They do everything and I don't have to do nothing. So time went by and we were still being enslaved. Now, here we come up on 1865, and President Lincoln once again put out a proclamation, and he got that proclamation to a Confederate general. That Confederate general's name was Gordon Granger. And he told Gordon Granger, you better let them slaves go. Sound familiar? So finally, on June 19th, 1865, all the remaining slaves were freed. Hence, June 19th, Juneteenth. That is our 4th of July. Juneteenth, June 19th, is the official day when the slaves were completely free. We still had a rough time, but we were free people. Now, when we celebrate July 4th, we're celebrating a time not only were we enslaved, but we're really celebrating the time of the Confederacy. You see, even today in 2020, there are people, hangers-on, who love that Confederacy genre, that whole Civil War genre around the Confederacy. And they will tell you the reason that we love our Confederate statues and the reason we love our Confederate flag is because many good people died in the Civil War. Now that's probably true, and it is true. Many sons and husbands and brothers and nephews died during that Civil War. But also, the Confederacy era stood for 3 very important ideals: slavery, segregation, and racism. You see, the Confederate statues were put all over the U.S. to remind black people, you might be free, but this is what you were. And psychologically, you always will be. And it reminded the Caucasian Confederatites, we still believe in racism, separation, segregation, and slavery. Now, the thing about the Confederate flag is that when you hang a regular flag, when you get ready to fly a national flag, you put it on a rope, on a pole, and you pull it up, and you fly that flag. But there's something different about the Confederate flag. Now, this is history. You can look this up for yourself. When the Confederate flag is flown. When they have a ceremony to put up the Confederate flag, it has to be put up with a noose, a hanging noose, and it has to fly 13 feet above a gallows. That's right. Now you understand why the noose is such a symbolic symbol to the Confederate hanger-ons. It's tied, intrinsically tied to that flag. Now, who were these men that signed that Declaration of Independence? Who were these men? Our founding fathers, the architects of our Constitution that America so proudly hails. I'll tell you who they are. John Adams. He was a slave owner. Ben Franklin, great slave owner. John Jay, he was a slave owner. Alexander Hamilton, yes, the same Alexander Hamilton that people are paying $500 to $1,000 to go see a Broadway play about. He was one of the greatest slaveholders. Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was not only a slave owner, but he slept with slaves and had slave bed warmers and concubines. James Madison and George Washington. So when you celebrate the 4th of July, you are slapping yourself in the face. You are demeaning your own self and your race, because the 4th of July is an American institution that believed in slavery. Again, in 1776, our ancestors were slaves. Now, in a few days, it will be July 19th. And I urge all African Americans to begin celebrating Juneteenth Day, because June 19th is the day we gained our freedom. Right now in 2020, there is a huge push in America to make Juneteenth, June 19th, a national paid holiday. Just like Martin Luther King's Day, just like the 4th of July. It is called our Jubilee Day. It is called our Freedom Day. It is called our Celebration Day. And there is an official flag for Juneteenth. It's a beautiful shade of light blue with white and red, no stars. You can actually go online and purchase your own Juneteenth flag. Juneteenth celebrations have their own food menu. We eat fried chicken, barbecue, greens, black-eyed peas, soda water, and watermelon, because it commemorates to us. It commemorates to us our Southern heritage. Just like they have a Southern heritage, African Americans also have a rich one. Now, I make this video because there's only a few days left, and it will be June 19th. I urge you to use your money for June 19th as opposed to July 4th. Please don't celebrate July 4th, that time of slavery. You see, with all the black men and women being killed right now in 2020, with the world changing the way it is, with the COVID-19, I'm outside and I have to be out here with the mask on because I don't trust the air to make me sick or to kill me. With all these changes happening in the world, we need to understand as African Americans, as black people, we can't stop racism. We can't stop individuals from feeling racist toward us, but we can change ourselves. And you see, that's where change begins. It begins with the individual. Before anyone is going to take us seriously, we first have to take ourselves seriously. We first have to show the world that we love our own culture, that we believe in our own culture, that we celebrate our culture, not the culture of slavery and Confederacy, but the proud and strong culture of the African American descendants that are here in America, us, the African Americans that are here today. We have to develop our own culture. There are generations to come behind us. We today are going to have to set the stage, set the platform for our children and our children's children and our grandchildren. This is the time. This is nation time for African Americans. It's a time where we say no more. It's a time where we begin to embrace our own culture, our own holidays, our own themes. It's a time of redirecting. It's a time of rebirth. So I urge you, all African Americans, be proud. Be proud. Celebrate you. Don't celebrate a time of slavery, but celebrate the brilliance, the strength and tenacity from whence we came to where we are now. We are a great people. Again, YouTube, this is not hate speak, but this is a history lesson. An old school history lesson from an old school advocate saying, this year, we are going to push Washington to make Juneteenth, signifying June 19th, 1865, the day that the slaves are freed, and that day is our 4th of July. I'm a proud African American, and I'm proud to celebrate Juneteenth. Never again will my family celebrate July 4th, a time of slavery. Like, subscribe. This is a Logic channel. Have a good day.